Welcome back to the Modern Hippie Podcast. I am joined today by Sam Kabert, who is a mental health and motivational speaker, a breathwork facilitator, and a 2-time best-selling author whose new book, Overcome the Overwhelm, just came out today as we're recording this. So how exciting, and congratulations on that amazing feat. Thank you for joining me today, Sam.
Absolutely, Barrett. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to dive in with you.
You and I have sort of been in each other's world, kind of in peripherals, never actually connecting until this point, but we have a lot of fit for service friends in common, and so I knew you'd be good people, and I'm so excited to learn more about how you got to this place in your journey to be tackling the overwhelm and to be focusing on getting out of that hustle culture. Like, where did your journey begin? What prompted you to dive into this work?
Yeah, absolutely. Great place to start always, right? 2019, I felt like I got activated, and I wonder if you or the listeners can relate to this, but I know for myself, there's so many people I met in 2020 during the lockdowns where they just got quote unquote activated the year before in 2019. When I say activated, I think of it as like the movie Soul, where they're playing in the astral realm and then they kind of like zap the guy in the office and he's got all the computers and then he throws the computers everywhere and he's like, I'm free. Right. And that's what I kind of think about, almost like the higher self, our higher self, like being like, all right, now it's time. Like in a certain kind of way, I think of it like that. And then it's like, oh, no wonder why so many people were activated in 2019. Right. For me, that looked like a numbing depression with sleepless nights. I really, all of my goals and accomplishments and successes that I was chasing kind of culminated in that time in 2019. In February, March of 2019, of going through these sleepless nights and this numbing depression, I was on the verge of being named Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 list. I was on the verge of building my company to $1 million business, which both of those things did end up happening that year. And I just wrote my first 3 books in less than a year. I was doing a lot. I was on the board of multiple nonprofit organizations, just very much indoctrinated in hustle culture and doing more. Bigger is better, more, right? And really, it was a relationship that was the catalyst for that numbing depression. I was with this woman I was seeing for about 4 years on and off, like literally no joke. We probably broke up and got back together like 50 times, like extremely toxic, right? And I was very much out of integrity. I mean, I knew the relationship wasn't going anywhere, but it was like for me, lust. And she was a cheerleader for my favorite team, the San Francisco 49ers. And I was friends with some of the executives in the Niners, just like living the dream, on the outside, but on the inside. Yeah, exactly. With quotes,
Quotation mark.
living the dream. Yeah. Everything that I thought I wanted, but in doing the work over the next several years, it became so clear that I was doing the things that I thought I was supposed to do rather than the things that I wanted to do. Also, before we hit record, you and I were both sharing about how it's about the journey, not the destination. I was so focused on like, when I achieve, I will feel XYZ. Yet that was never really the case, right? It always left me feeling more empty. So on a high level, that's how I got into this work. Ayahuasca found me first, and that was April of 2019. And one night was all I needed. The second night's another story. I did 2 nights with my first sit, but one night was like everything I needed and more. And from there, I changed my entire life. I moved out of Silicon Valley to the beach town of Santa Cruz, got out of the toxic relationship, started to explore career transition, left my fantasy football league, which sounds silly, but that was a big deal for me. And yeah, I just changed everything and it just went deeper and deeper down the path.
Wow. And so I don't know how much you know about me, but I love psychedelics. So I'm really glad to hear that ayahuasca had that beautiful impact on you. And I think it's something so many people share, and something I hear a lot in the field. People are afraid to take ayahuasca because they're worried that it's going to change their whole life. And we just want to dig at that piece just a little bit quickly, like, because what I'm hearing from you is it changed your whole life, but in a way in which your life wasn't fulfilling in the first place. And so it illuminated all of the shadows and all of the areas in which you were, like you said, caught in that hustle and caught in the quote unquote, air quotes again,
Right.
that American dream, or just that dream of, I'm going to date the hot cheerleader. I'm going to have all the money. I'm going to have the successful business. And that wasn't fulfilling for you. And ayahuasca was like, boom, in your face. Here's what life is really about.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing up this topic so much. And what comes up for me is I think in the integration, a lot of it lies within like our own personality and right and what we're really about. Like for me, as an entrepreneur or someone who achieves these successes, like as a solopreneur and building my business with virtual assistants and freelancers, I was in sales by necessity, even though like I'm more of a marketer than a salesperson. But I got pretty good at sales. And my business coach from when I first started in business, a few years in at least, I think it was around like 2013, 14, Joe Szynski, he was encouraging me to put the pedal to the metal when I was achieving my sales goals. And I quickly realized I was like, no, I'm good. Now I'm like coasting, like I'm coasting, I'm good. So my personality trait has always been more like, no, I'm not really about like the hustle and the grind and the more and the all of that. Like I just want to like feel good and okay, I'm here. Let's now enjoy it, right? So I think it makes sense for my integration with ayahuasca to change everything to be more in alignment and to answer your question or the topic a little bit more directly of people that might be like fearful of doing ayahuasca or another medicine because what I'm alluding or hearing in your topic is like they might lose that drive, you know? Um, this is really fascinating because I look at Aaron Rodgers, right? And Aaron Rodgers did ayahuasca, I think it was like 2 times, and then went out to be the MVP. I don't remember if he was the MVP, twice after that or if it was just directly the next season, but nonetheless, the point is clear, like, you look at this guy who clearly has that very strong work ethic and is like, "All right, let's go." That shows, like, 2 totally different personality types. Um, for privacy's sake, there was a professional athlete that I connected with at some point that most of your listeners would know. He's a famous NBA player, and we were talking about Bufo and ayahuasca, and he had done ayahuasca, and he was curious about Bufo, and he was asking me some questions because I have a big background in Bufo, and um, one of the things he mentioned was now that he had done ayahuasca, how he couldn't relate to his teammates anymore and how he did feel like he lost that drive. So that goes to show, like, I really think there's something here with like knowing what your personality is like. It's not necessarily that the medicine's going to change you to your point, right? It's going to illuminate that more.
Mm. You are highlighting on something I was just looking at on social media today. There was like a picture that Aaron Rodgers posted with like his squad or whatever. And I was looking at it, and I don't follow football, but I just kind of assumed they were predominantly football players or whatever. And I was having this conversation in my head about, wow, I wonder how challenging that is for Aaron Rodgers to be now like the spokesperson in mainstream sports for psychedelics and for ayahuasca and for the power of their transformation. And, like he's best friends with Aubrey Marcus too, who's a wonderful psychonaut and medicine practitioner and wisdom keeper. And Aaron Rodgers is receiving a lot of that as well. And I'm like having that conversation in my head of, I wonder how he feels being around his teammates. And that's something I hear from a lot of people. And I think it's part of raising our consciousness. Like there becomes the point when we're new to it that we're like, I can't tolerate these these cogs, these workers, these people who are stuck in the matrix. And then what I've found in my personal journey is even the higher I've gone up the rung of spiral dynamics, the more I've raised my own consciousness and stabilized more of that, the more it becomes kind of like the practice to be with the rest of the world. Like we don't get to fully eject from it. That's not an option. how do we be with it and become the embodiment of the messages and the truths and the wisdom and the lessons in a way in which our experience begins to change the experience of those around us? And I'm curious what kind of advice you gave this athlete for his journey.
Yeah, this was several years back. So actually 4 years ago now that I think about it. So I'm trying to think back to it. And I think it was more of like a conversation. I don't remember exact like advice, but my advice for anyone listening that's curious about sitting with any plant medicine is looking at the archetypal energies of yin and yang. And we can equate that to the feminine, masculine for your listeners. When I speak to corporate audiences, I don't use those words. But yeah, feminine, masculine, yin, yang, inner world, outer world, all these sorts of things. A book I wrote a few years ago is called Soul Life Balance, as opposed to work life balance, where we can look at work and life and so clearly see that's the yang energy, the outer world, the masculine. So it's like, no wonder why we have this mental health crisis, because we're double yang, right? So from everything I look at, I think about it as a yin yang or soul life balance type perspective and approach. So for me, when I'm thinking about saying with a medicine or advising someone, if they're asking me questions about it, it's that balance. And not to put a percentage on it, but I say like maybe 70 to 80% of that should be being called, like intuition, inner world, yin, feminine, where it's just like, whoa, like this is undeniable. Like the universe is conspiring for me and make this happen. Right. But at the same time, like we don't want to just be like 100% in this, like spiritual, like just, oh, I'm feeling called. Right. To your point of, I forget what you just said, but you said so eloquently about integration, right? And this is where the discernment comes in and be like, okay, but does this actually make sense for me logistically? Do I have enough time to prepare and integrate? It is the Wild West right now with medicine facilitators. So am I vetting this facilitator? And so many other questions to ask as well. So typically when it comes to saying with a medicine, I mean, my best piece of advice is like really make sure that it's like undeniable. And an easy way, like a barometer or check this to see if you're being called or if you're in the masculine, is like if you need to approach this like you would for a vacation, meaning that you are online researching where to sit with the medicine and looking at flights, hotels, your calendar, and you're totally in your masculine for the whole thing. Well, that's probably a good point to be like, oh, wow, maybe I'm not being called. Now, there is a caveat to this because I think when we are at those total rock bottom lows and it's like, no, I need this and this is what's going on. That's like where I'd put the asterisks on this and be like, okay, let's change these percentages a little bit and not get so fixated on like 60 to 70, 80% and be analytical about this. You just be like, all right, I'm ready and I know I'm ready. And I may not be being quote unquote called, but I'm ready to surrender to whatever is going to happen because I am at rock bottom and something needs to give. And that's kind of what comes up for me.
I think you absolutely just nailed the example of being fluid with it, finding that soul life balance. So, like getting away from, as you just described, those masculine attachments to the numbers. What percentage am I being, and being so rigid with it? And again, finding that flow because there is that divine balance in each of us. And sometimes more masculine energy is needed, and sometimes more feminine energy is needed. And that's beautiful. And it exists inside each of us. And I like how you've drawn in that calling to the medicine. For me, there's this example, like a year and a half ago, I was going to Peru and I had planned this big trip and I had this like week free. And I happened to hear another podcast and listen to a shaman talk on it. And I was like, holy shit, I need to meet this human. And I followed him on Instagram. His name's Hamilton Souther, who became my shaman mentor. And the next day, Hamilton had messaged me and was like, hey, I'd love to interview on your podcast. And I was like, holy shit. I was going to figure out how to invite him on my podcast. And so I was like, and in talking with him, he just happened to invite me to his retreat that was going on the week I had free in my Peru trip.
Mhm.
And I was
There you
like,
go.
I'm already going to be there. Like, what a gift, what an offering.
I'm so glad you brought up Hamilton. I had his name on the tip of my tongue, just waiting for an opportunity to bring him up because I know you studied with him, and Hamilton is awesome. I think he's been on my pod and spoke to my groups a few times. But he's such a great guy. I haven't sat with him yet, and that goes to show to the point of like feeling called. Like, I mean, I've been putting the intention out to sit with ayahuasca for over a year now. And I've sat with ayahuasca, I think, I'd need to count, but maybe 5 or 6 different occasions, not necessarily nights, multiple nights in those occasions. But, yeah, I'm where I'm at with ayahuasca, I say, like, that's my first love, but also, like, waiting to make sure the next time I sit with the medicine, it's undeniable. So, yeah, I would love to hear more about your experience with, his training program at some point, but so awesome to hear that.
Yeah, I'm glad you're in his field too. We have a lot of crossover. There's a lot of listeners on this podcast who I share with his field, and he's just incredible. The lessons and teachings. What I really love about him facilitating is he brings in all of the wisdoms. He brings in the Buddhas. He brings in the angels. He brings in Jesus. He brings in all of the shamanic experiences because it's all in the frequency and it's all the mythology that anyone in the room can draw upon at any point in time. And so he's so connected to consciousness in a way that I think really resonates with Westerners, especially who are beginning to understand how we are all unified in this unconditional loving oneness. So I hope you do get a chance to get down there and sit with him at some point.
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little more about this soul life balance. Like, it sounds like you were very deep in the entrepreneur lifestyle. And so what advice would you give to someone who was kind of in that same place, who's caught in the hustle and just feeling like what does being out of alignment like that feel like?
So this is a great question. And in terms of being out of alignment, what it feels like, I didn't necessarily know because I was so consumed with distracting and numbing myself. Like I knew something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I didn't grow up with having the tools to, talk about your thoughts and your feelings and really not only talk about them, but accept them and know how to process them. And both of us being integration guides now, I bet we both hear a lot from people where it's like they don't necessarily know what they're feeling. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. Like that was a big thing for me too. I couldn't know what I was feeling. And something I did, which I've been thinking about a lot the past few weeks, so I just need to go on Amazon and buy it. But I used to have a magnet on my fridge that had, whatever it is, like 10 or 20 emotions, and then it has a magnet on top of it where you circle the emotion, you just slide it on top of it, and it really helps like identify how you're feeling. Now, for me, going back to the soul life balance type stuff and where I was at, I just call it hustle culture. Something that happened or an experience I had just a few days ago, a good friend of mine, she's a yoga instructor. She's probably early 30s, has been teaching yoga for I guess not 15 years, that wouldn't be possible, but at least 10 years or longer. It's been a while. And I've learned so much from her. I used to go to her yoga classes a lot before I became a yoga instructor. And we were catching up, and her whole career has been as a yoga instructor, now trying to expand and into coaching and then like podcasts and being overwhelmed with the website. And I need to figure out the podcast. Then I see you writing books. I want to write a book. Like I want blah, 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 all this stuff. And she's starting to listen to more of these mainstream influencers that I used to listen to that talk about entrepreneurship. And I forget exactly what she said, but like, meanwhile, I'm preparing for a TED talk in a week where I'm talking about soul life balance and how all this chasing of success led me to yoga and spirituality and in my inner world. And here she is having already found that way and now going to the way I was. And I'm like, oh my God, what is happening here? So it's just it can be very demoralizing because it is so easy to get caught up in hustle culture and making more money so that we feel secure. Because at the end of the day, making more money or bigger podcasts or books or fame or notoriety, any of it at all is just about feeling secure. And it truly it breaks my heart when I see this, because I believe that the yoga instructors, I haven't thought about this in a while, and I've said this so much better than I'm about to say it now. But if like yoga was something that we taught to our youth, and I'm not talking about the asana, because yoga, for anyone listening, most of your listeners probably already know this, but there's 8 limbs of yoga. And one of those limbs, 2 of those limbs make up the yamas and the niyamas. And those are like the ethical guidelines and principles and values in which to live. And if these were taught to our society, we would have such a more beautiful world where we would be able to connect with each other, human to human. And these yoga instructors that straight up aren't getting paid anything, they are doing so much for our mental health. And I experienced that firsthand as being a student, and then turning to be a teacher. And then it's kind of frowned upon sometimes, but I started a men's group as well. So I started to become friends with a lot of my students and didn't necessarily adhere to the teacher student relationship. And starting to hold space for my students outside of the studio, I really got to see how much of an impact that yoga is making on people. Just it's not just the asanas, the meditation, the breath work. It's the things that the yoga instructors are dropping in between in the lessons. And it's just a travesty that here they are, the ones that are doing so much good for our mental health, but they can't maintain a lifestyle. So I don't have a solution in terms of what to do financially, and then this gets into a really sticky and interesting and esoteric conversation that I'm sure you would love. But in terms of quantum physics and the subconscious mind and how much we're creating our reality. And Tim Grimes, he's an author. He's written, I don't know, over 10 books. He takes a lot of Neville Goddard's work from the early mid 1900s, Neville Goddard, spiritual teacher, and he repurposes it. And one of Tim Grimes' books blew my mind. The title is called Relax More, Try Less. And I love to tell this story because at the time I was really struggling. This was just a year ago. And I think maybe 3 months went by where I only made a couple $1,000s. And I'm struggling financially, trying to figure out this career transition and experimenting different things of what I want to do next, right? And where am my integrity? Where do I feel like I'm out of alignment? Okay, I have old habits of being salesy and don't want that, right? All these sorts of things bubbling up. And it almost gets me to a point of just wanting to not do anything or showing up with a needy energy. So all of that to say, I had these few months where I didn't make any money. Then I went and saw this wizard. This is another conversation we could talk about because he lives out nearby you. He's a real life lizard. I highly recommend seeing him. And all this went on with the wizard. He's an energy worker, real life wizard. And in the integration of that, that's when I stumbled upon Neville Goddard's work, or went deeper. I stumbled upon the book, Relax More, Try Less. And I took the lessons of Relax More, Try Less to heart. And I stopped doing all the sales stuff. I stopped trying so hard in business. And I focused on my breath work, my meditation, getting out to the beach and just grounding and calling it in from a quantum physics, subconscious type of point of view. And within the next 4 to 5 weeks, I brought in $27,000. And I tell this story because it's just so mind blowing. And I continuously still gaslight myself being well, no, I need to do the things, right? So I'll pause there because I just took your question and went in so many different directions.
But you took it in so many beautiful, colorful directions. And yes, I want to know about this wizard. And yeah, I think you really just illuminated something that we all struggle with. I see it in my business too. It's the less money that comes in, the more I'm okay, I need to churn out content. I need to create the next masterclass. I need to structure, masculine. And when I really step back and go, okay, now that I've done those things, I'm exhausted. I'm underplayed. Like play is my huge frequency. And I find when I'm not in my play energy, and boy, I have a little 7-year-old inside of me who just lights up. My childlike sense of play is on point. And when she's not on point, the universe is so sticky and so challenging and nothing flows. And then I come back to, okay, well, then let me just hang out. Let me play. Let me go to the dance thing I didn't want to go to. Let me spend more time surfing than I'd planned this morning. And then that all of a suddenly it's like, boom, here's a client I didn't know existed. Boom, here's someone else I didn't know followed me wanting to have a conversation. Boom, here's a referral. Boom, like, oh, and it's that magnetism that we have when we're living our dharma, and I wanna take that exact comment back to the yogis teaching the yoga. In Everyone's got their own unique dharma, and some people, not everyone is on the path of, like, insane abundance, which, is I think personally a shame because there is so much abundance. Like, whatever we can create with our own minds and call in from the quantum field, it gets created out of nothingness. So it's like if you want that financial abundance and that security and you create it, it's not taking it away from anyone else. It's simply being created for you. And I just am coming off of a 5-day retreat with Planetary Dharma and Dr. John Churchill and his wife, Nicole Churchill. And it's a Buddhist training program that I'm in that's 4 years long. We're a year and a half in, and we just had a five-day in-person retreat in Boulder. And one of the things we got to talking about was like living our dharma. And we're all there because we're basically like dharma sluts. Like anytime that we have the vision of like, God, I want to give up. I want to pack everything up. I want to go live on a beach. I want to have nothing. And we just get called back to our dharma, which is being of service, which is for me on my path, it's bringing people back home to themselves in love. And anytime I try to stay away from that and go away from that, life gets a little bit harder. But there's this idea that tends to go with, like you said, this sharing of the wisdom and teaching, and that tends to come with this idea that we need to suffer and sacrifice along with that to share the wisdom. And we really don't. We really deserve to be nourished. But different souls came here to learn different things, and each person has a different path.
Totally true.
Yeah, that hustle culture, though, that'll annihilate you. And so your book now that just came out today is Overcome the Overwhelm. Tell me about what is the wisdom you have dropped in there?
Whew, all right. Time to get deep. Let's do it, Barrett. So cool. Yeah, a year ago, what is it? It's May 6th. End of February 27th. Let me take you guys back to February 27th of 2023. Now, I've told this story publicly a few times, and I feel like each time I tell this story, I'm starting to go a little bit deeper because it's a very touchy subject where I try to be as mindful as I can in this story to just talk about my experience and no one else. So I was seeing this woman and we lived together. She had a 6, 7-year-old, I forget now at the time. And I mean, everything on paper looked great, right? And we were going around town facilitating breathwork journeys together as well, like really doing a lot of great stuff in the community in addition to the relationship. And friends for about a year or so previous to it. So like, it seemed like we knew what we were getting into. And I knew her big family, like 80 of them, like big Greek family, and they all loved me. I loved them. So totally knew what we were getting ourselves into. Well, one day, this is something that I've never shared publicly, so we'll go here. This was February 27th, 2023, and she wants to talk before her daughter goes to school. So she puts her daughter in the front room with TV. We go to the back room, and she starts this conversation and says something to the effect about how negative of a person I am and how I'm always like bringing her down and everyone down and just saying all this stuff about me that I've struggled my entire life seeing the glass half empty and, really identifying with SAD, the acronym SAD, seasonal effectiveness disorder. And this was during time of thick of winter, and we were in gnarly storms as well. And I had told her a lot of times before that, like, how, no, I'm kind of a grumpy person. Like, I have to work so hard to be positive. And like, I started this journey when I was 18, and like, you don't know me because we've only known each other for a few years. So like, it's cyclical, right? It's going to come in waves. So how it felt when she said those things about me felt like a dagger in the heart. And it felt like as she continued to do that, she was twisting the blade in my heart. And at this point, I have tears coming down my face. Not like tears, but like, I'm kind of like that one slow tear. So like, I have a few tears, and I'm holding back tears, masculine stuff that I need to work through, right? And I said in that moment, as I stuttered, and can we curse on this podcast?
Fuck yeah, you can.
Fuck yeah. I was like, fuck you. And then I went, I feel like punching you in the face. That's what I said. And I thought in the moment I was doing a good job because I was expressing how I felt. And I thought that she, or anyone that knows me, knows that not only would I never lay a hand on a woman, but I'm not a violent person. Like, I don't even have a background in fighting or anything like that. So she took that and ran with it. Next thing you know, she moves out. She breaks up with me via text message. I'm just going to fast forward all the things. She tells me she's pregnant, and I try to do everything I can, all the grandiose gestures and everything to not do the right thing, but like, I'm heartbroken at this point, being like, really? Because I said that? Really? Really? Like, I understand that's a trigger point. There's so much more here to unpack. That said, that was obviously at the time of this recording a year and some months ago. So there was a baby born that I've never met. I've been blocked from this entire process. I've tried to work with this person to have some sort of homeostasis or relationship. But at the end of the day, like, whatever happens in the future, I know my truth, and I know that I will be there for this kid, assuming that he's mine, one day when that time comes. But for right now, that time is just not right for either of us. And it's unfortunate, it's devastating, it's heartbreaking to say the least. But in the process of going through all of that, that's when I started to go into a deeper layer of my own work. That's when I started to really go into, how is all this happening for me? Because I know this is happening for me, and it took a while, but what I end up doing was adopting like it's game time mentality, being like, okay, if I'm learning about doing the work and I'm doing all like this deep work, and I know karma, soul contracts, to your point, and that we're entering in for different lessons, and that it's so much more than this human experience, and being like, okay, so how is this actually happening for me? And I started to work with Canvas really intentionally. And I would use the mantra. What was the mantra? Um, it was, thank you, is there more? Oh, it's, I'm here for this, and thank you, is there more? So basically what it would look like was, I'd work with the canvas, I'd go in my bed, no music or anything, just an eye mask, and I would just feel my feelings, allow all the stories, all the insights, all the lessons to come through, all the memories, the hardships, the anxieties of the future, all of it to come through, and use the mantra as an anchor, the mantra that is, I'm here for this. And when I finally got to a place of like, okay, like, I feel good with that, then going a layer deeper with the mantra, thank you, is there more? And I would rotate between those two, and so much started to get revealed to me. And that's when I went deeper in this work. I really got into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work on another level. I studied his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I took like copious and meticulous notes and found out that book is like a scavenger hunt, and it's pretty much like impossible to integrate and apply that book if you don't just take a ton of notes. So I started to research that and other modalities as well. And I came up with this visualization and this process to shatter limiting beliefs and stories. And it was really working for me. And I started to share it with my clients. And it was really working great with my clients as well. And at some point, there was a few weeks there where my mind was just like, I didn't understand what was going on, because I was like, day to day and moment to moment, I feel great. Yet this is the most challenging time in my life. Like, am I disassociating here? Like, really being honest with myself. Like, am I just telling myself I feel great, or am I just distracting myself from how I really feel? Like, there's no way I can feel this good. But at the same time, like, maybe this is just like 3D conditions where I feel like I should feel like this is the most challenging, hard time in my life because of these 3D conditions. There was other stuff as well going on. And it was in a tapping class at a yoga studio, like a 45-minute like tapping class of all things, that helped me to break the story of this is the most challenging time of my life. Because I mean, it's obvious when you frame it this way, but if you feel good moment to moment and day to day, then maybe it's not the most challenging time of your life, right? Even though despite on like a 3D level, it's like, well, clearly like that's pretty damn challenging. So all of that to say, this framework, the 6-step breath process, the word breath is an acronym for the 6 steps. That's what I'm sharing in the book, Overcome the Overwhelm. I had zero intentions of writing this book. I went to Bali last November, December to do a Kundalini teacher training, which ended up being a ton of shadow work. I came back from Bali feeling like I had my tail between my legs. I started to do expressive writing, or the Pennebaker protocol, where you talk about a traumatic event, or you journal about a traumatic event every day for 4 days. And I did that event on February 27th, 2023. And in doing that expressive writing about the traumatic event, I started to have a whisper to write a fiction book about what had happened, loosely basing it off of myself and the characters involved, thinking, oh, this can help me to process this on a more creative level and alchemize it. And then I'll have something too for one day for my son that be like, oh, can't say this didn't affect me and I didn't care, Well, it wasn't about like putting anything out in public. And I started to watch master classes on how to write fiction, because I've written 5 books previous to this one, but they're all nonfiction. I don't know anything about writing fiction. And I loved those master classes. It got my creative juices flowing. I was writing this book, this fiction book, for probably 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, this other book wanted to come through me. And that is now the book that I released the day of this recording, Overcome the Overwhelm. Literally, that book was like channeled through me. It came through me. The first 50 to 75% of it just flew through me in a matter of weeks. And I was even reading the physical copy last night, because I haven't like read it with my hands, a physical copy, only on a Google Doc. And in reading it in my bed, like I would normally read any other book, I felt like I was reading someone else's words. I was like, oh, and I actually had Hamilton on my podcast where he talked about one or two of his books that he wrote in a weekend, how he's channeled as well. Neither here nor there. So that is Overcome the Overwhelm, the 6-step breath process to access inner peace. That is the backstory that most of the time I don't typically share. The breath process, happy to get into that. That's simple as well, but I'll just pause there.
Wow. What a fucking journey you have been on. And thank you for sharing it so openly, so authentically, so vulnerably. I imagine there's a lot of people listening who can resonate with the challenges that you've overcome, and how complicated that situation must be to be where you are and know that you have part of you out there in someone else, and that one day when the timing is right, that you will get a chance to have a relationship, hopefully, with that person. So I hope that for you. And
Thanks, Barrett.
yeah, and at the same time, what a gift that channeled through you to share with humanity, to be sharing your dharma with all of the lessons that have gotten you to this point right now, and how overwhelming it makes me resonate so deeply with that word that you chose, overwhelming that situation must have been to then channel in all of your wisdom gained into how do I help other people to overcome such a similar position.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm wrestling with constantly as well is like, am I doing healing work to help others to bypass my own healing? And that's something I try to be very cognizant of because I didn't know that archetype existed until this experience and seeing that in someone else. And then being like, well, if our relationships are mirrors, and I had this profound realization, this download of external family systems, meaning that like internal family systems are parts, they can be the physical manifestation of those internal parts can be the mirrors in our closest relationships. That's why I'm calling that external family systems. So then being like, okay, so if I'm experiencing this part in another, which is really not another, as we all know, we both know, then is that mirroring back to me something that I don't see? And then sitting with that and being like, oh, am I the one that's bypassing doing my own work? So there's definitely like a lot of uh, trippy different rabbit holes to go down. And all we can really do, at least I feel like, is be authentic and know our truth and live up to our sadhana, you know?
Keep going down the rabbit holes. And
Yeah.
and falling in love with going down the rabbit hole, like falling in love with the process that every time we get to go into a pain point that is obviously painful, but that by going into it, we're able to release it, we're able to clean it out, we're able to allow for new skin, new emotional frequencies to heal over it that begin to elevate us. And so in that sense, what a gift to be able to feel. What a gift to be able to have painful experiences and curriculum to learn from and to grow and to expand. And but I personally am really resonating with what you just said about, am I spiritually bypassing by helping others do their work? And something that really resonated with me on the last day of my Buddhist retreat, with this idea that, through all of this, we connect to the unity of oneness and the universal love and the divinity of God, of consciousness. And at the same time, I caught myself doing a lot of judgments in the last week. Like I was really judgy of other people. And I normally offer radical acceptance. Like no one would ever hear this from me. And it started to cause me to go internally and realize that my inner critic was like on loud blast. And in the last day of the Buddhist retreat with that teaching, realizing that while I externally love so much, and unconditionally each and every being in this planet, that there are still the parts of me that were just getting this inner judge hammering down on her. And I'm like, oh shit. I've been doing a little bit of bypassing in my own work, which is, focused on self love, self love, self love, and turning a bit more of that back inward, self, really loving that self.
Agreed. Yeah, that really resonates with me. It all comes back to self love.
And how does breath integrate into what you're teaching? I notice you're also a breathwork facilitator, and that's such an important tool that we have available to us.
Absolutely. So the 6-step breath process is an acronym. So the 6 steps are, for the first one, breathe to slow down. Second is relax to feel. Second is energy to reveal. Fourth one is accept to surrender. The fifth one is transform into empowering beliefs. The sixth one is H, habits to integrate. So I'll run through each of those real quick. I'd like to invite people just remember 3 simple themes because it can be a lot to remember these 6 steps at first. So remember to breathe, feel, and think intentionally. It'll look like this. We all experience triggers from time to time, right? And without like labeling or defining a trigger. Let's just agree to think about triggers as something that keeps us away from being in the present moment. And now we're thinking either about the future or the past, right? And at this point, we have a choice because we always have a choice. We can either respond or we can react. Now, for me, when I'm reacting, I'll walk myself on over to the cupboard and grab a big bag of pistachios. Next thing you know, I'm hovering over the trash can and it's a big bag of pistachios. And like half of this bag is gone. And I'm just cracking shells at that point. And then finally, I'll get to a point where I'm like, what am I doing here? And it's in that moment that I now have the opportunity to respond as opposed to react, because the reacting is the disassociating, it's the numbing, and it's the distractions, right? And for me, it's typically emotional and binge eating, but I think all of us can relate to our phones and going to our phone and just scrolling. Oh, is there a new update? Is there a new email for me to respond to? Oh, no one likes me because I haven't gotten a text since the last time I checked my phone. Oh, poor me, victim mentality, right? All this type of stuff. That is reacting. That is disassociating and numbing ourselves from feeling what we feel. Whereas when we respond, in my case, when I notice I'm eating these pistachios and wow, if I just went through 5 minutes of hovering over a trash can of eating pistachios, there's probably something going on inside. So what is that thing? All right, let me seal up this bag. Let me put it away. Let me go over to the couch and take a seat. Close my eyes. First things first, I'm going to breathe. And by breathing, I start to regulate my nervous system. I start to slow down. I start to focus on my third eye. I start to go within to my inner landscape. I'm just slowing down at this point. That's literally the first step. Breathe to slow down. The second step is feel to relax. So basically here, I'm going to allow myself to feel the different emotions that are coming through my body, because emotions are energy in motion. And if I don't allow myself to feel those emotions, they get stuck and stored in the body. And in 2008, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor delivered a brilliant TED Talk. And in it, she told us about the 90-second rule. And the 90-second rule teaches us that our body processes emotions. Literally, we have a physiological response in 90 seconds. And now that we understand that emotions are energy in motion, okay, maybe this won't be so bad if I can just allow myself to feel these emotions so that they can move through me. So the second step, feel to relax. Third step, we get into energy to reveal. So now that we know these emotions are energy, what is this energy revealing to me? What's the lesson? Is there a recurring story? Can I find some wisdom here? And this is where it can start to get tricky. And this is really where, like, if you have a specific form of breath work that you like, you can practice that. I teach a few different ones, but most of all that really matters is just focusing on your breath and elongating the exhales. And when that story or that lesson comes through, it can be challenging, right? So that's when we're like, oh, I don't want to see that. Kind of like what I was talking about earlier with the mantra of, thank you, is there more? And I'm here for this. Like, this could be helpful right now to use those mantras. And it's for that reason we get into the fourth step, which is accept to surrender, because we need to accept whatever this story is. We need to surrender to it and find the lesson in this. This is literally the shadow work in these first 4 steps. It's like, hey, I understand that these emotions will pass through me if I allow them to, but if I don't allow myself to feel them, then they're just going to get stuck and stored in the body. I'm just going to go on a downward spiral. And now into the 5th step, transform into empowering beliefs. Because we've just done the first 4 steps, we've earned the right to call upon the power of positive thinking, because there's so much toxic positivity in the world right now where it's like, just feel good. Like, literally, yes. Anything you want to add to that?
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. It's like bypassing. It's like learning peak performance without actually learning how to face your emotions. So, like, just learning to override the system, but you're not actually handling the muck within.
Totally. Yeah. It's more dissociating and compartmentalization. You know, for a long time, I was like, what the heck is the point of compartmentalization? This is terrible. So I hit up my friend, Alicia Kay, who is a trauma-informed therapist. And I said, hey, let's do a podcast on compartmentalization because I don't understand this. And what we got to was, yes, compartmentalization is good because it helps you to to move forward, right? To operate. But where she agreed with me, which is what I was like really wanting out of that, right? Was that compartmentalization is bad because most of us put it on a box and we never open that box,
Mm.
right? We just compartmentalize so that we can get through whatever we need to get through, which, yeah, now I understand that's a good thing. That's necessary. But if you're never going to revisit it, then you're never going anywhere. You're just a hamster on a wheel. So this is that toxic positivity where people are like, never entertain a negative thought or a negative feeling. Yeah, you're lying to yourself and your body knows better. And that's what creates dis-ease within the body. So this is where step number 5, we can transform into empowering beliefs so that we can leave this situation on a high, on a good note, on positive thinking. And we need to do this because neuroscience teaches us that we have over 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those thoughts are from the day before, and 90% of those thoughts are negative. So if we don't regain conscious control and think intentionally here, then we're just going to be stuck in a negative feedback loop. So that is the 5th step. And finally, we get to habits to integrate. My favorite word, literally, my license plate says integrate with 8s instead of E's. And I think it's all about integrating and taking action, because there's no point in feeling your feelings and sitting with the thoughts and the shadow work and doing plant medicine ceremonies, listening to podcasts for self-help, self-development, soul development, any of this stuff, if you're not going to integrate and take action. And that is the final step. So it's as easy as like looking like, okay, well, what do I need? What's the new habit that I need to take action on? What am I actually integrating? Well, if you went deep enough on step 3 and 4, what is that energy revealing to you? And you surrendered to that. Now it's going to make sense. Okay, let me change this thing. Here's something I got to do different. And I tell people like, listen, I don't want you to have to do the 6-step breath process. Yes, it only takes a couple minutes to run through and you can quickly overcome stress, anxiety, grief, anger, whatever it is, into peace. But the more you do it means that you're not actually integrating. You should have to do it less and less. If you continuously find yourself having to like sit and be like, oh, I just need a moment here because I'm having some emotions come up, chances are that you're not going deep enough on those steps 3s and 4, or you're not integrating. So when you start to take action, you start to do this. Yes, at first it will be a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit uneasy, whatever, and you'll have more actions to take. But over time, it's going to be like second nature. Oh, yeah, here's an emotion. Let me cultivate this awareness around it. Let me breathe through it. Let me feel it. And then I'm going to think intentionally and go on with my day. And this stuff works. I mean, this is what I did for me to get through that challenging time in my life. I still do it now. And what I'm helping my clients to do as well. And what's so cool about it too is like this book, in a lot of ways, I tried to keep the language more accessible than in Soul Life Balance. Cause in Soul Life Balance, like I have a glossary of like 100 spiritual terms for the newly activated, where it's just like, what are you talking about? I don't know what that means because we use these big fancy words. And I'm talking about aliens, human origin story, and all the different psychedelics and all this stuff. With Overcome the Overwhelm, it's like, no, here's a framework that you can use right now that's going to help you to cultivate moment to moment awareness. And it works just as well for people sitting with bufo and ayahuasca or even mushrooms as it does the everyday corporate professionals that like, have zero interest in any of that. I just want peace. I just want to have less stress. It works forever at the end of the day. So high level, that's what it's all about.
Amen. Amen to that. Like getting people out of that stuck state, those lower frequency energies, helping them find the tools to raise their frequency so that get real hippie on this, but like we can help humanity ascend into the new earth, into the next dimension. And what I find that looks like is enough humans on earth who have opened up their 5th dimensional awareness, which is the intuition, which is hearing more of the downloads in the field, that enough people raise there that it shifts the earth. And the new stewards are here. But your method is really well thought out, and I love each intricate step, and I'm so it's like you didn't leave anything out, and that's
It
really beautiful.
Thank you, and yeah, I mean, even the method itself, the framework, like, came through me, like, it's nuts, going back to relax more, try less, like, I didn't go out wanting to write a book, like, this whole thing came through me, and I'm like, "This is really good," and this is like, thank you, thank you, thank you, and at the same time, it's like, when I look at what Dr. Joe has, and he's been an incredible teacher for me, like, I absolutely love his work, and there's so many others as well. It's like, can't I just have, like, a framework or, like, what do I actually do with this all? And that's where I've just been, like, struggling in my own journey, being like, "Okay, I take a little bit from here, I take a little bit from there," and then luckily, like, one of my good skill sets is kind of like being a manifester. That's my human design, and being able to like create a framework or a process and be like, all right, here we go. Like this now makes sense. We can apply this and integrate it, you know?
Mm, phenomenal. You have done an exceptional body of work, and I commend you for that. And it's definitely something that, like, as I work on figuring out my own framework as well, just interesting to hear how each person has done it. And I love your breath acronym that makes it so readily rememberable and accessible, and I get that it's tough to have left the hustle culture and to care so much about those who, I don't want to say not care about those who are stuck in it, but that your framework is really accessible to anyone, no matter where they find themselves in their own conscious development, where they find themselves in their own spiritual awakening. Like, this is applicable. This will help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, we got to meet people where they're at. And you said something at the beginning of the podcast about like integrating back into normal society after we work with the medicines and or even like 5D frequency, all this type of stuff. Going into public speaking in corporate settings was like a culture shock for me. That used to be my world, but I became so immersed within spirituality that I was like, "Oh my god, I didn't realize people like this still existed and things like this are still going on." And just was like so repelling and I could feel my energy. I forget how you said it earlier, but I've been able to like employ different energetic hygiene and cleanses to be more aware and cognizant of that so I'm not as affected, but it's definitely like it's a totally different frequency when speaking and working at like corporate conferences and things like that. And I mean, I can't come in there and start talking about soul life balance. I thought I could, turns out the word soul is too much for a lot of them, even with my like really watered down explanations and everything. And that's just for a certain segment. That doesn't go for everyone. Like I said, I talk about yin and yang versus feminine masculine, for example. But I just think of this as kind of a Trojan horse strategy, instead of like telling them like, here's the red pill and here's why psychedelics could help and all the deep stuff, being like, no, I trust that they'll find their way. Let me just start with them, like some really basic stuff. Like it always blows my mind. I don't know if I'm going to do this with the new speech for the new book, but with the soul life balance speech, I would speak on stage, look out into a sea of, I can think of one that was 100 people, another that was 700 people. And I can always find someone who, when I lead them through like a 2-minute breath work or visualization, there's tears coming down. And I just think to myself, like, at first I kind of laughed, not like judgmental laugh, but more like, oh, this was nothing, like that kind of laugh. But now it's just like, instead of like, because that was just a shock for me before. Now it's more like, wow, this work is so profound and it doesn't need to be as deep as you and I and many of your listeners goes. It can be as simple as just like taking that sacred pause and a breath and be like, wow. Like I literally got an email in writing this book from one person that said, I don't have time to breathe. She emailed me back saying something about how she didn't have time to breathe. Another person emailed me, and this was within the same week. And clearly, this is the only time this happened in the past 5 months, and both of these happened in the same week. And I was in the thick of writing the book. So clearly, it was happening for me to give me more case studies and ammunition for the book. And the other person said, I wish I had more time for mindfulness. And I'm just sitting here being like I almost want to just screenshot and save these emails like you would with a testimonial, being like, really, this is what's out there, But anyways, yeah.
I completely relate. One of my longtime psychedelic ceremony clients was getting ready to sign on to coaching with me because he really needs to develop a mindfulness practice. And I've been after him for a while now. I'm like, you complain about you don't really know what you would do with free time because you never have free time because you fill all your time, and that he's become really reactive and struggles when he gets triggered kind of thing. And I'm like, we can fix that with meditation. And he was very ready. And now he just recently told me he's got a big life event happening and he doesn't have time right now to sign on to the coaching to learn the meditations and the mindfulness because he needs to do it when he's less busy. And as you know, and I'm going to express, like, the busier you are, the more you need mindfulness and meditation and breath work. Like, because the mind gets so wound up, it begins to suck out like a vacuum, that's space, that is where the ideas come from. That's like where we attach to the field. That's where we get in flow. And the more we let our minds run away with ourselves, the less that we're actually in control, the more it's just the ego online. And it's not the soul living its dharma and walking its mission and bringing its gifts to the world. So I hope you saved those emails and those messages to save as proof, because something I also talked to my teacher this week about, Dr. John Churchill. We were talking about this method that's channeling through me. I'm getting a transmission on that. I'm just, poof, you have no choice but to bring this to the world. And it's a humming breathwork, inner body self-healing method. And I was asking him, like, I've sat down now and hummed Om for like 3 hours straight. Do the Buddhists know? The Buddhists must know. And in that humming had all of these incredible things come, also while on the medicine of ketamine and cannabis. But the humming in and of itself can create these incredible states. And so I'm like asking him, after I got this transmission, then I discovered Brahmuri, which is the bumblebee breath that the yogis are aware of. So I was like, okay, of course they were already aware of humming. But everywhere that I see it being taught initially online, everyone's instructing people to do 7 hums in a row. And I kind of said to my teacher, like, they're telling people to just like hum 7 times. And I've been doing it for 3 hours. And you're not going to get to where I got humming 7 times. And so I'm like, what do the Buddhists recommend? What do the yogis recommend? And he's like, and I'm like, hum 7 times. Like, if you were so busy, hum 7 times. Sure. Fucking great. It downregulates the nervous system. It does all sorts of wonderful things, helps calm the mind. But the longer that you do it, the more benefit you get. And so as I'm developing it, I was like, gosh, where do I start people? Do I start people at 10 minutes of humming? Do I start people at 30 minutes of humming? And I asked my teacher, and he's like, yeah, well, we dumb all these things down for Westerners because they don't have time. And he's like, in actuality, in the Buddhic traditions and in the monasteries, like, they would hum for hours and hours and hours on end. And so he's like, let's workshop this. Like, let's put together a little labs. Like, let's hum for 3 hours, and then let's hum for 3 hours on cannabis, and then let's hum for 3 hours on ketamine, and then let's hum for 3 hours on ketamine and cannabis, and figure out where the magic of what you discovered is really coming through and how to make a replicable, repeatable process with that. And I'm like, you want to sit down and hum for 3 hours with me on multiple occasions? Like, yes, fuck yes, sign me up, because I've experienced the brilliance of what that is. And so I admire a body of work that you've put into honing your craft and your method and the amount of time you put into it. And I hope we both get to share and bring people into our world. Like, follow us, we have some of the answers in calming your mind and beginning to experience joy and wonder in the world instead of just overwhelm.
Yeah, 100%. I'm excited to see how that unfolds for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And so where can my listeners buy your book and where can they best keep up with you on social media?
Yeah, thank you. My website's samkabert.com, Kabert. All the links are right there. I have podcast Soul Seeker that's linked there as well. And the book is Overcome the Overwhelm. You can find that on Amazon by searching Overcome the Overwhelm and or my name. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. You'll find it. Anything you need on the website, that'll be redirect you wherever you want to go.
Perfect. And we'll have those all linked up in the show notes. This has been such an incredible conversation with you, Sam. I'm so glad we got a chance to connect and share all of the beautiful work that you're bringing into this world.
Thank you, Barrett, for how you're showing up for your community and being a light shower for others. And I see you, and I'm so stoked to have you on my podcast and unpack your story and go deep.
Oh, I'd love that. Yes. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.